Obese mail order bride rejected at train station. Mountain man said, "You're exactly what I've been praying for." The small train station of Copper Falls buzzed with the murmur of voices as passengers stepped down from the eastbound rail car. The townsfolk had gathered not only to greet newcomers, but also to witness a mail-order bride's long-anticipated arrival. Evangeline Ava Thompson descended the steps, her old valise clutched in her trembling hand, and a placard with the name Mrs. Blackwood held to her chest. Her heart pounded with both fear and hope. For 8 months she had exchanged tender letters with Cornelius Blackwood, the wealthy merchant who owned the largest store in town. Those letters had promised a new life, a husband's protection, and perhaps love. But when Cornelius stepped forward, finely dressed and flanked by his servant, his expression shifted to one of disdain. His voice cut across the platform, sharp and merciless. "I asked for a wife, not an elephant. You're so fat I fear my floors will collapse beneath you." Laughter broke out among the bystanders, snickering, muttered jabs, the cruel kind of mirth that wounds more deeply than knives. Ava's cheeks burned crimson as tears welled in her eyes. The long journey, the whispered prayers, the fragile dreams all shattered in a single moment of public humiliation. She turned as if to climb back onto the train, her chest tightening with shame. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a deep, resonant voice rose above the mockery. "If he won't accept this gift from heaven," the voice declared, steady and strong, "then I will." The townsfolk fell silent, heads swiveling toward the figure emerging from the shadows, a tall, broad-shouldered man with scarred hands and steady brown eyes. Isaiah Zeke McReynolds, the mountain blacksmith, stepped forward, removed his worn leather hat, and bowed before Ava. "If you'll have me," he said gently, "I'll be proud to be your husband." Ava stood frozen on the platform, unable to comprehend the cruelty of Cornelius's words still echoing in her ears. For months she had imagined this moment differently. She had pictured a shy smile, a welcoming arm, a chance to begin again far from Chicago's whispered insults. Instead, her arrival had been met with ridicule so public, so cutting, that she thought she might collapse under its weight. She was not blind to her own reflection. Ava had always carried more weight than other women her age, her frame soft and full. Yet she also knew the kindness in her heart, the cleverness in her hands, the sweetness in her voice. Still, to the world, her size was all they saw. Cornelius turned his back on her as though she were no more than an unwanted parcel. "Send her back east," he muttered to his man. "I will not chain myself to that." But before Ava could flee in disgrace, the voice from the crowd steadied her trembling knees. Isaiah Zeke McReynolds pushed forward, towering above most men, his shoulders thick from years of ironwork, his palms marked with scars. His face bore a jagged line across his temple, a relic of the mine explosion that had nearly claimed his life 3 years earlier. Since then, he had lived largely apart from Copper Falls, coming down from his mountain forge only when necessity forced him. Many whispered that he was strange, half-wild, and best avoided. Yet now, with quiet dignity, he looked at Ava as though she were a rare treasure. "Ma'am," Zeke said softly, inclining his head, "if you can overlook a man's ruined face and lonely cabin, I would count myself the most fortunate soul alive to call you my wife." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Some sneered, others exchanged astonished glances. But Ava, through her tears, saw only the honesty in Zeke's eyes. He was not mocking her, nor pitying her. He meant every word. Her heart, fragile though it was, leapt at the chance for dignity restored. I would be honored, she whispered. Within the hour, inside the modest clapboard church at the end of Main Street, vows were spoken. The preacher's voice carried softly, and though no kin stood to bless them, a solemn bond was made. Cornelius lingered at the back, his jaw tight, his pride wounded. He thought himself rid of her, but already envy stirred in his chest. For what he had thrown away, his scarred brother had claimed. That night, as twilight bathed the town, Ava climbed into the wagon beside Zeke. She cast one last glance at Copper Falls, its curious stares, its cruel laughter, and turned her face toward the mountains. The path ahead was unknown, the cabin humble, the man beside her scarred. Yet for the first time in many years, Ava felt something bloom inside her chest. It was not fear, it was hope. The wagon creaked as it rolled away from Copper Falls, its iron-rimmed wheels groaning against the frozen earth. Ava clutched her valise tightly, the hem of her traveling dress brushing against Zeke's broad shoulder as he guided the mule team northward. Behind them, the town's lanterns flickered dimly, shrinking to pinpricks in the dusk. The silence stretched between them at first. Ava dared not speak. She was still trembling from the sting of humiliation at the station. Yet when she glanced sideways, she caught the outline of Zeke's face in the moonlight, scarred, yes, but calm and steadfast. His hands, massive and roughened by forge work, held the reins with surprising gentleness. "Are you warm enough?" he asked at last, his voice low, almost uncertain. She blinked, startled by the simple kindness. "I think so." Without another word, he shrugged off the heavy wool cloak draped across his shoulders and settled it around her. The warmth of it, faintly scented with smoke and iron, enveloped her. Ava pressed her lips together, swallowing a lump in her throat. He had given her his only protection against the cold without hesitation. The trail grew narrower as they climbed, the air sharper. Tall pines closed in on either side, their branches whispering in the night wind. The sky stretched wide above, studded with stars more brilliant than anything Ava had seen back east. At one point, the mule stumbled against a stone. Ava gasped, clutching the side of the wagon. Instantly, Zeke's arm shot out, steadying her. "Easy now," he murmured. His hand lingered for a breath longer than needed before he withdrew, and she felt her cheeks warm beneath the chill air. Hours passed. When at last they halted to rest, Zeke built a fire with practiced ease, sparks leaping into the darkness. Ava watched him work his movements quiet, deliberate, sure. He handed her a tin cup of broth he'd prepared from dried meat and herbs. She sipped cautiously, then closed her eyes. "It's good," she whispered. He gave a small nod, though his lips curved in what might have been the faintest smile. They ate in silence, but it was no longer a strained silence. The fire crackled, casting golden light on his weathered face, softening the scar along his temple. For the first time since leaving Chicago, Ava felt a thread of safety winding through her heart. That night, Zeke laid his bedroll near the fire and gestured toward the wagon bed. "You'll sleep there," he said. "It's drier, and the boards will keep you off the ground." "But what about you?" she asked, frowning. "I'll manage." His tone allowed no argument. Ava curled beneath the borrowed cloak, watching him stretch out on the frozen earth. The flames painted his figure in shifting hues, scarred and solitary, yet noble. She thought of Cornelius's contempt, the townspeople's laughter, the cruel words that had nearly crushed her spirit. Then she thought of this man, who had spoken up when no one else dared, who had offered her warmth without expectation. Her eyelids grew heavy, her heart still tender, but no longer despairing. For the first time since stepping onto the platform at Copper Falls, she whispered a prayer of gratitude. By dawn, the wagon carried them deeper into the mountains. Streams glittered in the morning light, deer bounded across the ridges, and the forest opened at last to reveal a clearing where smoke curled from the stone chimney of a sturdy cabin. "This is home," Zeke said simply, guiding the team toward the little house he had built with his own hands. Ava gazed at it, her chest rising with both awe and uncertainty. It was humble, far from the grand house she had once imagined, yet something about its weathered timbers and the man standing proudly beside it made her feel she might have found something far more precious. Not comfort, not luxury, but belonging. The cabin was small, hewn from pine logs and set snugly against the shelter of a granite outcrop. Its roof was weathered but strong, its chimney sending out a steady plume of smoke. Ava stepped across the threshold, her boots clicking softly on the plank floor. Inside, the scent of wood smoke and iron lingered, mingled with the faint tang of pine sap. A single room greeted her, a hearthstone at one end with a crackling fire, a rough-hewn table and two mismatched chairs, shelves crowded with tools, jars of herbs and books. A narrow bed stood against the far wall, covered in a patchwork quilt, faded with use. "It isn't much," Zeke admitted, setting down her valise. His deep voice rumbled in the quiet. "But it's safe, and it's yours, if you'll stay." Ava ran her hand along the smooth grain of the wooden table. Everything here bore the mark of his labor, sturdy, practical, without pretense. Her heart swelled at the thought that every board and beam had been lifted into place by his scarred hands. "I think it's beautiful," she said softly. For the first few days, they lived like cautious strangers bound by new vows. Zeke rose early to tend the forge and the mules, his shirt darkened by soot and sweat. Ava busied herself with the hearth, unpacking her few belongings, sweeping the floor, and preparing meals from the simple stores he kept. The first evening, she made a stew of venison and root vegetables. When she set the bowl before him, she felt her nerves tremble. Would he, too, make some cruel remark about her love of food? But Zeke only bowed his head in thanks, spooned a mouthful, and looked up with quiet surprise. "It's good," he said, just that. But the honesty in his tone warmed her more than any compliment. Each day brought small discoveries. Ava learned that Zeke had taught himself to carve wood during his long solitude. He showed her a set of intricately whittled animals that sat on the mantel. She revealed her skill for writing, pulling from her valise a leather-bound journal filled with careful script. One night, as the wind howled outside, she read aloud a passage she had written about the train ride west. Zeke listened intently, his brow furrowed as though each word were a treasure. In return, he sang for her soft, low ballads from Scotland his mother had once crooned by the fire. His voice was rough, but it carried a tenderness that made Ava's chest ache. Still, doubts clung to them. Ava often caught herself glancing at her reflection in the darkened window, whispering the cruel words Cornelius had spat at her. And Zeke though kind, sometimes drew back as though ashamed of his scars. But slowly, the cabin itself seemed to weave them together. He built her a chair with a wider seat, carved with delicate patterns along the arms. She mended his torn shirts with stitches so fine they seemed invisible. One morning, when she burned her hand pulling bread from the oven, Zeke caught her wrist and plunged it gently into cool water. His touch lingered, his rough thumb brushing her skin. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, something neither dared name, but both felt burning. At night they would sit before the fire, she with her journal, he with his knife and wood. Sometimes silence filled the room, yet it was not lonely silence. Other times their voices mingled, laughter rising like sparks. The scars on his face seemed less severe when he smiled. The weight she carried seemed less heavy when he looked at her as though she were more than enough. One evening, as snow drifted softly outside, Ava leaned back in her chair, watching Zeke repair a broken hinge. "Why did you step forward that day?" she asked suddenly. He looked up, the firelight catching the rough lines of his jaw. "Because I saw the way they looked at you, like you were less than human, and I know that feeling. I couldn't let it stand." Her throat tightened. "Do you regret it, marrying me?" His gaze softened, steady as the mountain. "I don't regret a thing. You're exactly what I prayed for, Ava. Maybe I just didn't know it until I saw you." Tears welled in her eyes. In that moment, in the glow of the fire, the cabin felt less like four walls and more like sanctuary. And for the first time, Ava allowed herself to believe she might truly belong not as a burden, not as a jest, but as a wife, cherished and chosen. Winter came early to the mountains. Snow draped the pines in heavy silence, and smoke from the chimney curled skyward in steady gray ribbons. Ava and Zeke grew closer with each passing week, yet beyond the warmth of their hearth, a storm of another kind was brewing. Cornelius Blackwood could not stomach defeat. In his grand parlor, surrounded by ledgers and half-empty bottles of brandy, he raged at the memory of Eva walking away on his brother's arm. A fat, penniless girl and a scarred hermit, he sneered to the shadows. And yet the town whispers about their courage while mocking me. His pride burned hotter than his greed, and he swore he would take everything from them. The first strike came quietly, like a serpent slipping through grass. Whispers began in Copper Falls that Ava had been married before, that she had abandoned a husband back east. A stranger arrived in town, calling himself Jonathan Miller, claiming to be her lawful husband. He showed a worn photograph of a plump woman who bore some resemblance to Ava and brandished forged papers. At first, Ava dismissed the rumors. She had letters and documents proving her name and past were honest. But the stares in the general store grew sharper, the laughter behind her back louder. When she went to purchase flour, the shopkeeper hesitated before filling her order, muttering that he didn't deal with liars. Zeke noticed her silence at the supper table, the way she poked at her stew without appetite. "What troubles you?" he asked one night. Ava set her spoon down with trembling fingers. "They're saying I was married before, that I deceived you." Her voice broke. "Zeke, I swear, it isn't true." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his scarred palm. "I believe you," he said. Yet later, when he sat alone by the dying fire, doubt gnawed at him. The papers the stranger had shown looked convincing. Could it be possible? Could the woman he cherished have hidden such a truth? Cornelius pressed his advantage. He paraded Jonathan Miller through town, demanding Ava be returned to him. He even went so far as to corner Zeke outside the blacksmith's forge. "Face facts, brother," Cornelius said smoothly. "The woman's a fraud. She'll bring you nothing but shame. Best let her go back east where she belongs." Zeke's fist tightened around the hammer in his hand. "You don't know a damn thing about her heart, and neither does your actor." But Cornelius's words lodged like splinters. That night, when Ava reached for Zeke, he turned away, his mind clouded with fear he was too proud to voice. She cried silently into her pillow, wondering if her weight, her past, her very presence was too heavy for him to bear. As the snow deepened, so did the tension. Ava found herself glancing at Zeke, desperate for reassurance. Zeke, tormented by conflicting emotions, grew quieter, retreating into the forge until late into the night. The cabin, once a sanctuary, began to feel colder despite the crackling fire. It was Martha, the widowed healer of the town, who noticed the cracks. She had taken a liking to Eva, seeing in her the same resilience she herself had once needed as a young bride. When Ava confided through tears that she feared losing Zeke, Martha set her jaw. "My dear, lies cannot stand forever. If Cornelius is weaving this, we'll tear the threads apart." Martha began asking questions in town, paying attention to details others overlooked. She discovered that Jonathan Miller carried a pocket watch engraved not with his name, but with the initials of a Denver theater company. A slip of the tongue from the sheriff's deputy confirmed that Cornelius had paid the man handsomely upon his arrival. The truth was within reach, but time was running short. Cornelius had filed a petition at the courthouse, seeking to annul Ava and Zeke's marriage on grounds of bigamy. If the petition succeeded, Zeke could lose not only his wife, but his claim to the mountain land and the silver vein beneath it. One evening, as the wind screamed outside and frost thickened on the windows, Ava stood before Zeke, her chin lifted despite her trembling. "I won't let him destroy us," she declared. "If you can't believe in me yet, then let me prove it. I'll face Cornelius myself and bring his lies into the light." Zeke stared at her, torn between fear of losing her and awe at her courage. His heart ached with the weight of his doubt, and he realized the cruelest betrayal was not Cornelius's lies, but his own hesitation to trust the woman who had given him hope. And so, as winter pressed on, the stage was set for confrontation not only between brothers, but between truth and deceit, love and fear. The snow had not yet melted when Copper Falls gathered at the town hall. Word had spread like wildfire. Cornelius Blackwood had petitioned to have Ava's marriage annulled. The benches creaked under the weight of curious townsfolk, eager for scandal. At the front sat Cornelius, polished boots gleaming, smug confidence in every line of his face. Beside him lounged the man calling himself Jonathan Miller, shuffling his forged papers with feigned importance. Zeke entered last, shoulders broad beneath his worn coat, scars visible in the lantern light. Ava walked at his side, her hands trembling, but her chin lifted high. She felt the weight of every eye upon her, yet for the first time since the nightmare began, she was not ashamed. Martha followed close behind, a bundle of papers clutched in her shawl. Cornelius rose with theatrical flair. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "my brother has been deceived by this woman who already belongs to another man. I only seek to protect him from ruin." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ava's knees quivered, but she stepped forward. I have never married before, Zeke, she said firmly, her voice echoing through the hall. The only deception here is Cornelius's. Cornelius sneered. Fine words, but words don't undo truth. Tell them, Mr. Miller. The impostor puffed up. I wed this woman 5 years ago in St. Louis. She abandoned me and lies. Martha's sharp voice cut through the air. She held up the pocket watch she had taken from the man's coat. This watch bears the insignia of the Denver Players Guild. This man is no husband. He is an actor. Gasps filled the room. Cornelius lunged forward. She's bluffing. But Martha was not done. She laid out letters correspondence between Cornelius and the impostor, detailing payments and instructions. Then she produced financial records, proving Cornelius had embezzled money from the town's bank. The hall erupted in shocked whispers. The sheriff, red-faced, tried to calm the uproar, but the townsfolk had seen enough. Men who had once nodded to Cornelius in respect now glared with open contempt. Women pulled their children closer, as if his corruption might stain them. Zeke stepped forward, his deep voice steady. For months you tried to poison my marriage with lies. You mocked her weight, her worth, her very being. But she is more woman than you could ever deserve, Cornelius, and I would rather live scarred and penniless in a cabin with her than rich and hollow like you. Ava turned to him, tears bright in her eyes. You believe me? I always did, he said, though the crack in his voice betrayed his earlier doubts. And I'll spend the rest of my days proving it. Cornelius tried to rise again, but the deputy restrained him. The townsfolk cheered when the judge banged his gavel and declared the petition dismissed, with Cornelius facing charges of fraud and embezzlement. As Cornelius was dragged away, Ava and Zeke stood together at the center of the hall, the weight of shame finally lifted. For the first time since she stepped off that train, Ava felt she truly belonged not as a burden, not as a spectacle, but as a woman loved openly and without condition. The battle was won, but as they left hand in hand, snowflakes swirling in the night air, Ava knew the war for acceptance and peace was not over. Yet, with Zeke at her side, she felt ready to face whatever storms might come. The mountain cabin glowed with firelight that winter night, its chimney trailing smoke into the star-flecked sky. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of wood smoke and stew. Ava sat curled on a hand-woven blanket, her hair loose around her shoulders, while Zeke stirred the pot over the fire. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence was not heavy, it was comforting, like a quilt laid over weary hearts. At last, Zeke crossed the room and knelt before her. His large, scarred hands reached for hers, rough palms enveloping her soft fingers. I failed you once, he said quietly. I let doubt creep in when I should have trusted you, but never again. You're my wife, my partner, the answer to prayers I never dared to speak aloud. Tears welled in Ava's eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming relief of being truly seen. You gave me a home when I had nothing, she whispered. You believed in me when the world laughed. I'll never forget that. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. You're safe here, always. This is your home now, if you'll have it. Her voice broke as she answered, I already do. The flames crackled, throwing golden light across their faces. Outside, the wind sighed through the pines, but inside, the little cabin pulsed with warmth, love, and promise. Ava laid her head against Zeke's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. knowing that whatever trials lay ahead, their love was the anchor strong enough to weather them all. And as the snow drifted silently beyond the window, Ava realized that her journey had not ended in rejection. It had only just begun in love. Every time I see your comments, I'm reminded of how stories can bridge distances, cultures, and hearts. Ava and Zeke's journey isn't just about a mountain man and his bride. It's about the way love finds us when the world least expects it, and how strength often hides in the gentlest souls. Where are you listening from tonight? Share your corner of the world. I'd love to know. And if you still believe in love that endures every storm, stay close. The next story is waiting, and it just might speak straight to your heart.